It's the day after Christmas, and a lot of us have had a lot of excitement that's gone on with family members, getting to be with family and friends through the holidays and spending time together. And I'm thankful for the blessings that God has given me, the family members, and a new daughter-in-law this year, and that I had the opportunity to be with my kids, my son, my daughter, family members, and extended family members. And my parents are missed. They're both now in heaven. And I think to myself, I was thinking back to holidays of past years, and I'm thankful for family members that God has given me. And I think sometimes when I look at my little great nephew and my great nieces, I think a lot about the future and what life will be for them should Jesus tarry his coming or his return to the earth. And the hope that I have for them is that life is going to be more stable, and it's going to be more positive, and it's going to be a better situation for them than it was for many of their parents or grandparents in the baby boomer and the baby buster generations. There were a lot of good things that happened in my generation when I was growing up. But there was also a lot of change in the culture. There was a lot of immorality and a lot of instability and a lot of drug use that entered the culture during those years, during those generations. And with God's help, I hope that God can help us to help turn the tide for the next generation of children and young people so that they don't make a lot of the same mistakes that our generation made. I think that sometimes when we like to pretend, all of us do, that we have perfect families, and of course we know that's not the case because there are no perfect families because people aren't perfect. And we all struggle with family relationships and trying to have healthy relationships, and that takes time and effort to build respectful relationships. And I think if there's anything that we learn from the past, it's that if we don't change mistakes of the past or change perhaps actions of the past, then we will have the same results or perhaps same failures in the future. And with God's help, if we want to be able to turn the tide, we don't want to make the same mistakes of previous generations. And I look at my own parents and I look at my own life of my children as I was raising them, and I tried to take the positive aspects of things I learned from my parents' lives, and I tried to learn from things that I thought perhaps had not been positive. And I guess a thing that would, when I was growing up, my father was pastoring a small church, trying to pioneer a small church, and trying to work full-time at the same time and raise a couple of kids along with my mother. And it was a very stressful situation, trying to make ends meet for your family and pay the bills, as well as build a church and try to help fund and finance the church as well. And my father had a lot of frustrations during my teenage years and my growing up years. And that made for a lot of difficulty between us. And there was a time when I had a great deal of animosity towards my father when I was a teenager growing up. I think if there's anything that we learn from this, we learn a couple of things. And that is that our family knows us better than anybody else. Nobody knows us better than our own families. And many times, if our families think that we're sincere and that we're trying to treat them with the same mutual respect that we want to be treated with, then a lot of times our kids and our family members will cut us some slack. I like to think that perhaps that's what happened with my kids. I have a son and a daughter that were raised, and I try to build healthy relationships with them. It takes time for that. But I look at relationships like with, as I was saying, my own father as I was growing up, and I think another thing that we learn from this is I really think the churches should be at least 100 people, and I've talked about that, the importance of that previously. But I think it's so important that teenagers and kids, they need leaders and they need programs and ministries to their own age groups. I think that's something that's so important that my brother and I needed as we were growing up. And I look at the issues, I guess, facing, I've been a part of the Assemblies of God all my life, though I have friends in various denominations. that call themselves by the name of Jesus Christ, from some that are Catholic, and then all branches of being Protestant. And I try to look, I guess, at the good and the positive things that we learn from people's lives. And I also try to look at those things that were, I guess, mistakes, or people that perhaps might say, well, I wish I would have done this or that differently in the way that my kids were raised, or the way I raised my kids. And I think we all feel that way. I certainly think, my goodness, there's things that I could have done differently and would have done differently with my own kids. But I think that the only way that we make positive changes for the next generation is to acknowledge the validity of things that needed to be changed from the previous generations, so that we can emulate the things that were positive, and so that we do not carry on the traits or the negative things that might have led to negative behavior in our family members. And I guess my prayer for everyone this Christmas season, this New Year season, is that God will help each of us to have the humility and the accountability and the wisdom that it takes to build healthy relationships with our family members, so that should Jesus tarry his coming, we can help turn the tide for the next generation. And with God's help, I really believe that many in the next generation will not make the same mistakes, and then will not have to deal with the same immorality and instability of many in the previous generations. I believe with God's help, God can give us wisdom to turn the tide. And I pray that all of my friends and family and acquaintances that I have on the social networks have had a very Merry Christmas, and will have a Happy New Year.